Gentlemen, you may have been listening to this podcast for a while now and enjoying it, but meanwhile, you're still not meeting and attracting the right women. Or you may already have a great woman in your life, but your relationship could be doing better. So, like other men who know what it takes to make life happen for them instead of to them, you don't want to go it alone. And like true champions and future champions invariably do, you're ready to get a coach. Now, lately, I've been getting more and more questions than ever about what I do differently than other coaches in this space. After all, you can kind of get inundated with all these podcast episodes. We cover all sorts of topics around here, right? Well, first of all, I'm the coach men hire when they have puzzles in their dating life and in their relationships that, books and videos just aren't solving. If that's you, you already know you deserve what you want, as I often say, but real-world results are somehow eluding you. Many of you know Emily and I both emerged from toxic relationships with exes suffering from psychoses. Lots of you guys are enduring a similar ordeal right now, right this very moment in time. Or perhaps you're still recovering from it, if it's happened to you in the recent past. Well, we've not only been there, we've helped plenty of men emerge victorious and move on to a better relationship with a woman who's not only sane, but who loves him and treats him right. Or you may be a man who is hyper-masculine in appearance and how you carry yourself, yet you're somehow different around women and it frustrates you to no end. And it's extra frustrating because you found that women have a zero tolerance policy for being Mr. Nice Guy when you're that sort of man. Man, we're seeing that more often than ever nowadays. You believe men are men, women are women, and anyone who drives a different narrative can go screw themselves, and probably already is. But most of all, I'm the guy men hire when they want straight answers, practical steps, and absolutely zero fluff, without all the buzzwords and such. The very first step is to go to mountaintoppodcast.com and get on my calendar. Your first 25 minutes is free, and listen, my guarantee is you'll have at least one action step by the time the call is finished. So then, how about it? Have you had enough? Are you ready to get the right woman in your life? Well, then go to mountaintoppodcast.com and let's do this thing.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Oh, how's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am, as always, your host, Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on YouTube, on Twitter, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, and also at Scott McKay on TikTok these days. With me today is a returning guest. This guy is so much fun. He always brings the energy and brings the noise. And he and I were chit-chatting the other day because we're both from Baltimore, and every once in a while we have plenty to talk about just basically on that topic. Plus, he's a good guy, and I like to keep in touch with him. He is the author of Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and also of a book called Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Try saying that if you have a lisp, right? But he is indeed from Baltimore, so he is a good man, obviously, if he comes from Baltimore. Also a fellow Ravens fan for sure. And he is also a podcaster. He's the host of the Going North podcast, and the topic du jour is advancing others to advance yourself. Dom Brightmon, man, welcome back.
Woohoo! Feels good to be back, Scott, man. That's right indeed. Love being on the show, man, especially since you do so much great work.
Likewise, man. Likewise. It's always a pleasure. So, when I hear a phrase like advance others to advance yourself, the first thing I think of is the foundation of social skill. Let me rephrase that. The very foundation of social skill that so many people never built, which is if you want to truly be a cool guy, make others around you feel cool. And then they'll think you're a cool guy, as opposed to being a douchebag, which is a guy who suppresses other people, hoping to put himself forward, kind of claws over other people to get there and has, well, probably as a direct result, an inflated, or dare I say even inflamed sense of his own coolness. No self-awareness whatsoever in that context. And meanwhile, other people are either, well, privately or publicly just rolling their eyes at him. Am I onto something there? Is this kind of what you have in mind here?
Man, you said that so well, man, and just like a perfect Matisse painting, my man, via the words, man. Like, dude, that's so spot on because it's so true. Like, hey, name of the game is make others feel good and you feel better as a result. Sometimes
well, at least it wasn't like a Jackson Pollock painting.
That's right.
That's a cleanup operation. I'm sorry, man. I had to. Go ahead. Continue, please. You're the one who wrote the book. Go for it.
Hey, but it's all good, my man. But hey, yeah, you're definitely spot on to D because it's so true. Like, hey, the name of the game, make others feel good, make them look good, and you look even better as a result because folks will remember you for it. And heck, it's even what you do with this podcast, Scott, because my goodness, my man's been cranking out. My goodness, it's been 350 plus episodes, if I'm not mistaken, over quite a few years. And most podcasters are lucky to get to 35 episodes and interviewing all these wonderful folks and learning from them and sharing them with your listeners and having an engaged audience over the years, especially with men to get that mindset. Like, hey, like if you're a guy and you help out your fellow bros, like get over, like that's definitely a big thing. Heck, even one of my buddies of mine and back in high school, we actually grew close together almost to like brothers nowadays because it was a time when it was a senior trip moment for him and I was the junior behind him, and he actually got the short end of the stick when it came time to draft classmates for their competitions in the game. So in other words, it's kind of like the Pro Bowl, except without the actual quarterbacking and the whole routes we had to run. Like we basically had to do capture the flag and all the other stuff in basketball.
So basically what you're saying is you're no Tyler Huntley.
Oh no, far from it. Like, hey, he's in the NFL for a reason. I'm not.
He's not in the Pro Bowl for any reason, and I'm saying that as a Ravens fan. But lest we digress, please continue.
Hey, go Snoop without the dog.
I think the NFL was barking up the wrong tree there, putting him in the Pro Bowl.
Hey, it's a living. You got to make it somehow.
It's
a forced.
Go ahead, man. So anyway, you're on the bus with this guy, and you're picking teams. Go for it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and sadly, he wasn't the most well-liked person, or at least he wasn't one of the teacher's pets, so we basically got a majority of the freshman girls, and they were basically tired after day one, and we had 2 more days to go, and basically I had to pull extra weight, and he was like, yo, dude, Dom, I'm glad you stepped up to the plate for me, man, because I would have been freaking gutted and got last place. Instead of being the 4th place out of the team 4, we got 3rd because basically pulling up the slack for him and really just sticking up for the guys. So, yeah, it's just really all about helping others to advance. Heck, even referrals in business, like with a buddy of mine, Kathy O'Sheim, she's actually restored her faith and hope in millennials because a millennial basically sent her about a good maybe 5 or 7 clients over the past 4 years off of a chance meeting where she actually just snagged one of my books back then when I was a first-time author. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, Dom, you're freaking amazing. Like, here's some guests for your podcast. It's the least I can do. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I'm actually going to write my book now and all this other wonderful stuff because it's like, hey, like, even if you don't feel like you come out of head, like, even referring folks clients and it actually works out, you'll look better for it because the thing is, in life, when you help out other people, it'll definitely come back to you in multiple ways.
So going along with that, your book is called Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself. Well, I mean, it's kind of sort of esoteric just to pat people on the shoulder and say, get out there and advance others, and then you'll get ahead. So you've actually written a book that offers something practical and actionable there. So give us a few examples. A few more examples. I think you kind of hidden a few in there already, but go for it. Riff on that.
Oh, sure thing. One of the chapters in the book is really about how mentorship is a book on steroids. Because the thing is, you can read a book all day and take actions from it, but if you have a mentor, someone to emulate and really take their lessons, learn from them, if you have those listening ears, it'll help you to really advance. Because one person who was actually one of my mentors, he was actually a Bible teacher, and he actually taught me two magical lessons. One of them was to have peace, you have to know war. And the second one was the magic word. So any guess on what that magic word might have been, my man?
Please. Said just like Peter Venkman, right?
That's like
I've watched Ghostbusters before.
That's right, indeed. Who needs Ghostbusters when you have Scott McKay, baby? That's right, indeed.
Who are you going to call?
As long as they talk.
Dom Brightmon.
Yeah, man. It's actually, the magic word is actually no, because sometimes when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to other things. It's like a lot of things are vying for your time and your schedule. And really, when you're helping others to advance and you're basically saying yes to them, you're saying no in other ways of, hey, yes today of volunteering and helping out the church with the play or even helping out with the food pantry. That's a big yes, but that's also saying no to being lazy and no to actually procrastinating on those things you feel like you need to do. That'll help you to advance. And him in his life, he taught me that sometimes he would say yes to too many things, especially when he first joined the church. And that caused him to burn out because he was saying yes to everything but himself. And as a guy, hey, it's great to put yourself out there, but you have to also remember true self-care, and that may be just a day to truly relax, to truly breathe, do things that you truly enjoy.
Well, in keeping with the concept of truly breathing, it's kind of like yield. Put your own mask on before you assist others. And boy, it sounds like what you're saying in a nutshell is when you make too many promises to too many people, when you say yes to too many people, no one's going to get advanced, neither you nor anybody else, if and when you flake out on them or you can't cash the check that your mouth wrote. Another thing that you mentioned there at the beginning was the idea of mentorship being worth more than a whole bunch of books. And I couldn't agree with that more. I would go so far as to say that's precisely the reason why when guys work with me as a coach, they get results a lot more quickly, because we can focus on exactly what's on their plate, clear the obstacles, open the door for the future, and address it in a way that really relates to their situation. I mean, as good as the programs we have like Female Persuasion and Invincible are, they're written to the masses. So they're very good, especially for guys on a budget. But when guys get into that coaching relationship with me, they see the results in exactly the way they want to see the results, and indeed have their vision increased in a way they never expected, and even get more results. Because, when a guy's been at this thing like I have for 17 years, sometimes I can see that light at the end of the tunnel just a little bit more clearly because I've seen it so many times before elsewhere. You know what I mean?
Preach. That's right, indeed. He's preaching a good word today, because it's so darn true. Coach, investing in a true coach who truly cares about your advancement and helping you succeed and gives you that true accountability. You'll make quantum freaking leaps. If I didn't hire a coach, oh my goodness, I think almost 9 years ago, I probably maybe not even have been on this podcast today. Heck, maybe even have the first appearance, because those quantum leaps, that accountability, that next level of accountability that we all need, because a book isn't going to smack you in the face and you're going to change your life forever. It's not going to happen like that.
Well, on rare occasions it does, but I think still it shortens the curve to definitely have someone right there with you, standing in the gap, someone who's been there before especially. Good stuff. What else is in your book? Give me another tip.
Sure thing. Another tip is definitely that life is customer service, and that's kind of a branch from the whole theme of advancing others to advance yourself. I mentioned Magic Johnson his rookie year, where one of his teammates actually snubbed a kid asking for an autograph, and then Magic Johnson stepping in and helping out the kid, helping him to stop crying, and even signed and autographed his stuff. And a couple of decades later, when he was starting as an entrepreneur, he actually had to meet with this guy who's known as a hard-nosed negotiator who likes folks to be punctual. And the guy he was meeting with was actually the father of that child that he helped to not cry anymore that day. And he was 20 plus years in advance early for that opportunity because, hey, he saw an opportunity to help the kids to feel better that day and Little did he know that he was early, really early in the future for that great launch pad for success. So just never knowing like who you're talking to, and you may be entertaining angels, or you may be entertaining future opportunities for your growth.
Well, that's just a huge point, man. I mean, that is a grand takeaway perhaps from this whole episode already. Life is customer service, and anytime you're dealing with anyone, you sow the seeds. You're sowing some sort of seed. It's going to be a seed of future resentment or a seed of future success. I've had situations when I was younger where I had a customer who was kind of small time when I was working with them, and either I lost my temper or I kind of messed up because I was also new at it. And then a few years later, a decade later, they've risen to the top. I've risen, up the corporate ladder a little bit, and we meet again, and they haven't forgotten what happened 10 years ago. But thankfully, those situations were few and far between. I mean, after all, I am human. I mean, that first example goes way back, but I never forgot the effect it had. But Dominic, certainly over the course of the last 20 to 25 years for sure, I've absolutely redoubled my efforts to go out of my way to treat other people with respect and tried to brighten everyone's day. And, that goes along with meeting women. I mean, a lot of guys are so sex focused, Dom, that, they'll try to charm this real pretty woman who's sexy to them. And the way I like to describe it, the analogy I use is open the door for that pretty woman and then let it slam on the grandma behind her, because her sexual capital isn't quite there in the guy's mind. But just wait till that grandmother has the hottest granddaughter ever, who happens to be 25, right? Kind of along those same lines. An example that comes to mind is I've always said that there are two kinds of people. People who understand the value of free publicity and people who don't. And I don't understand the second kind of people at all. So one time someone invited me to be on their podcast, and I was so honored, Dom, because they said, this is the first episode, and I'm a fan of your work, and I would love for you to be my very first guest ever. Now, the douchebag comeback would be, well, how many listeners do you have? If you don't have any episodes and nobody's listening to this, so I don't have time for you, right? Kind of like the guy who snubbed the kid's autograph only to have it come back and haunt him 20 years later. Or I guess the situation actually happened in reverse the way you see it, because you're always looking at the glass half full, Dom. I know that. So Magic Johnson steps in and stands in the gap there and makes the kid feel better. And 20 years later, that comes home to roost in a good way for Magic, right? Well, in this case, the guy's podcast blew up. I mean, it was sitting like top 2 or 3 in the sexuality category and was just compiling reviews and just, crushing it out there. And so I got a lot of play from that. I got a lot of people who listened to me on the first episode and then, became a fan of my podcast too. And it all started because, well, I wanted to help promote this other guy and help him get his podcast started because I felt honored enough that he enjoyed my work that I felt like that's the least I could do for him. And yeah, you know what? Good things happen as a direct result. I'm a big fan of everything you're saying. Please continue. Keep going, man. You're on a roll.
Hot dog and eggs, baby. I'm on a roll.
Hot dog and eggs, man.
That's right, indeed. And yeah, man, it's definitely so true. Like, just when you just live a little bit and then you acquire those great examples of like, hey, dynamic living, you definitely can keep going and growing. Heck, even another example of really advancement in my own life was the funny enough, it actually reminded me of the actual guest that actually snubbed my podcast at first, and now it's like, oh, we're a little bit on friendly terms now. But yeah, another thing that definitely really just steps out for me is the fact that one guy actually took the advice from me one day when he wanted to publish his book, and this guy was a Marine of all folks, and he actually has this wonderful a book, even put my quote in the book called Life Lessons from the Trailer Park, White Trash Wisdom for Everyone. Because at the time,
I'm already a fan.
Yeah, he's a no-nonsense guy. Clyde Milton, he's a no-nonsense guy. And he actually got deep in himself, because when you see him today, it's like, oh yeah, he probably had like little problems here and there, but nothing grand. But he actually was suicidal as a teenager, and his dad had to step in and help them to realize, like, hey, like, whenever you're done using the bathroom, I'm going to be right here for you. And that was after his first suicide attempt. And just that one small moment helped him to realize, hey, he still has folks that care about him. And he ended up joining the Marines and staying with them and traveling all over the world. And then eventually doing a side hustle, joining the John Maxwell team and writing that wonderful book and just helping out so many other folks and just becoming a confident master communicator who inspires me, because I never thought that a guy would see a millennial with a published book promoting himself and come to me for advice, and he took that advice and ran with it. He actually ran the darn play, because sometimes I'm sure you've had this in your past, Scott, where you give folks a play to run, they don't run the play, and the next thing you know, they get metaphorically sacked by life.
And then the next thing you know, they get voted to the Pro Bowl anyway.
Snoop.
Comedic recall there for you non-Baltimoreans out there. We're having way too much fun with this episode. I mean, the guys know that I tailor my approach and my demeanor to the guest, and this one's getting out of control in the best way possible. I can tell already.
That's a good sign.
Yo, yeah, for sure, man. For sure. If only everybody else was as much fun as we are post-COVID, the world would be spinning at a much more even keel. All right. In the book Stay the Course, you talk about the elite performers' 7 secret keys to sustainable success. What does that have to do with this topic? I'm sure it has to have something to do with it, Dom. Talk to me.
Sure thing. So in the book, the major key for elite performance is self-awareness, being aware of yourself. And that even calls back to the early beginning of the episode and the conversation where it's like, hey, being self-aware enough to realize, hey, I don't have to be arrogant in the room, be like, hey, look at freaking me. I'm the best in the freaking world. Like, I'm a gym bro. I do CrossFit. Like, I need to evangelize the good word of CrossFit to the world. No, it's all about being the best version of yourself and allowing people to shine and not trying to shine the light on yourself and, like, dominate all the conversation or try to nail every chick in the room, where sometimes it's best to keep them in the friend zone, so that way you can have folks to give you some intel. And the book
especially
is really,
if they're batshit crazy, just leave them alone.
Yeah, you don't want to find out they're a vampire, then you turn it to the 5th book in the Twilight series, and I think there's only like 3 or whatever.
So you don't want your 3rd book, your next book. Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question before you continue, because I think we require a little bit of clarification here. You're talking about self-awareness, and the context you kind of put it in, Dom, just now was what I would describe as having a sober judgment relative to your strengths and weaknesses. You know what you're good at. You know what you probably should outsource, and you're cool with all of that instead of trying to be something you're not or trying to prove somebody wrong when there's really no value in that. But there's another dimension of self-awareness that I think really does apply to the topic today. Not that the first one doesn't. It most certainly does, because that's how you can help advance other people. For example, by partnering with them in ways where they're stronger than you are. That's how you build alliances in this life. And that certainly helps advance other people to advance yourself. And a key takeaway there is show me an entrepreneur who's too proud to outsource and wants to try to do everything themselves. And I'll show you an entrepreneur who isn't an entrepreneur for long. They'll be getting a day job again. You know what I'm talking about. Don't shout me down for telling the truth, as they say from the pulpit. But I think especially post-COVID, and I talk about this zombie apocalypse mentality quite often nowadays, Dom, people just, they don't look around. They don't read the room effectively. I mean, one of the examples that just really gets stuck in my craw is this had never happened, by the way, in probably the first 30 years of my adult life. Okay. In the past year, it's happened at least enough times that I need both hands to count. I'll be putting my groceries on the conveyor belt at the supermarket. And, you know, when you're done, I don't know if they do this in Baltimore. I never really bought a whole lot of groceries in Baltimore. I moved away before I was really buying groceries. But what we do here in Texas is, as a courtesy, we put the little bar behind our groceries for the next person. You rarely have to do it yourself around here. I mean, nowadays I'm noticing I have to do it myself more often, but here's what started going on. I was still putting my groceries up on the conveyor belt, and the zombie guy behind me would just start loading his groceries on the conveyor belt without even looking. And I like have to turn around and go, okay, there's this block of Velveeta creeping up on me. Hey, is this yours? Yeah, why? I said, I'm not done putting my groceries up there yet, man. And then they look at you like you're the problem. And I'm like, I tell you what, let me finish up here. I'll pick up the pace and I'll put the bar here for you. And then, we'll move on from there. It's almost like you have to treat them like a 3-year-old. And they're still looking at you like you're the problem. What in the world? I mean, that is such a blatant violation of the self-awareness code that you got to wonder how these people made it alive to whatever advanced age they are, You
can see that again. Heck, even not only that, but also with driving too, where folks don't even see the red light. They just keep driving.
Oh, that happens
constantly.
Where you live too. Oh,
Yes.
I've had people look me in the eye through their windshield and drive in front of me through a red light. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Crazy town, man. Crazy. But self-awareness to me, it's almost like in the year 2023, the first one to figure out how to read a freaking room effectively is our new CEO. I mean, it's almost like that easy.
It's true.
It kind of is.
It's true. Yeah. Especially with the darn zombie apocalypse devices known as the smartphones, the slab of distraction. Like, dude, like those
The slab of distraction. Brilliant. Oh, man, chef's kiss for that. The slab of distraction.
It's the sod we don't need.
Maybe we need a new Guns N' Roses album, like the big comeback album, and call it Appetite for Distraction.
Oh my goodness, a song about notifications.
Or User Illusion 3. How about that? See, you could come up with a whole bunch of Guns N' Roses ideas there. Wow. All right. Go for it, man. So the elite performer's 7 secret keys to sustainable success. Hey, man, you wrote them all down. They're not secret anymore. Spill the beans. Give us a couple more.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely not secret. I blame Victoria. But anyways, the first 5.
Victoria? Victoria and her secrets, for sure. Yeah. And I haven't bought lingerie on the behalf of someone else in ages. I'm a married man these days. She takes care of her own. I was a little surprised. I don't know. It's probably off topic. Nobody cares. I mean, when was the last time a grown-ass man cared about a Victoria's Secret catalog? It was sometime before broadband. I know that for sure.
Oh, God. Man. Again with the distractions.
Get me started on that one. All right. 7 secret keys as yet unknown by Victoria. Go for it.
Hey, it's all good. So my goodness, the magical book, my goodness, stay the course. Like one of the magical keys that definitely sticks out is habit awareness, being aware of your habits, and advancing is a habit, really. It's kind of like when you network with other people, then you really know what really helps them out the most. And heck, even the powerful question is what's going right for you in business. That's one thing I sometimes ask folks because it's a way to stand out, and you get to help folks to think of something positive and sometimes bring them out of their stupor. It's kind of like asking an author what if your book were a food, what kind of food would it be? It gets them to really think of something good and something creative. And that way, that's another form of advancement, just helping folks to expand their minds and expand their thinking, especially nowadays when we just got done finished talking about, how folks are so darn distracted and their attention is elsewhere and they're not focused on the here and now. So being in the habit of really connecting people constantly, if it's a perfect fit. Heck, even another wonderful topic from the book, and this is even a bonus chapter from the book, is reading and growing rich. I know you talked about books earlier in the episode, but sometimes, even though it's better to have a mentor and a coach, books are still great. And it's kind of like the story in the book where there's this giant gold Buddha statue where these monks were being invaded. And to protect that statue, they threw a bunch of clay and mud all over it. So that way, when folks had the statue, they thought, oh, this thing's just a big old piece of heavy junk. But years later, when they came across the statue again, they just saw a random light of shining, just shining and radiating off of the statue. And when they cleared off all the mud and realized they have a giant gold Buddha statue, like they're like, oh shoot, this thing is freaking valuable. And that's just like a book, and that's just like your fellow human being. Like you never know who you may be entertaining. Like advancing others, they may come back and help you to advance as well, because another guy who actually, he's a big listener of my podcast, Stanley McCloskey, he actually wrote his first book because he supported me and I gave him a shout out on the show. And it so happens that episode was one where a past veteran said, hey, if you haven't failed in 6 months, you're not really living. So that put his butt in gear. He published his first book, and they asked me to be the voice behind his book. And I got 4 figures from that wonderful exchange. So really, it's all about advancing others. Like you could be talking to walking palladium, walking gold. You don't even know it. They're just covered by this clay. So that just means just keep folks in mind and helping folks to be the best they can. And heck, we're all human still. We're going to have days when we're off, but still try to keep the long game in mind. Keep the long game in mind.
You know, Dom, as I listen to you talk about these concepts and the recurring themes in them, what I think needs to be said here is, in a world where everybody's trying to exercise selfishness, and you hear the word narcissist a lot, and it seems like looking out for number one is the way to be, and to heck with everybody else. It isn't so much this idea of advancing others to advance yourself becomes a selfish act. It's more like, again, here's that phrase, right? It's a self-awareness with regard to just how human beings are supposed to build each other up in this life instead of tear each other down. Obviously, if you bend over backwards for someone or you're generous towards someone, the expectation there, or at least the valid expectation there, is this person shouldn't just take everything from you and come back for more. That's dysfunctional and crazy. The expectation there is the psychologically proven principle that when you give to someone else, they're more likely to want to give back to you and feel good about giving back to you. That's how sane, healthy, unbroken human beings work with each other. So this idea of advancing others to advance yourself really is, in the spirit of self-awareness, getting in tune with this dance of human goodness towards each other, which indeed, you know, this world could really use a lot more of nowadays, right?
Oh, preach it.
I think I just did.
Put it in a collection plate, folks.
You know what's funny? I don't know if these guys know this because I don't usually talk like this. But when I worked for a nonprofit with gang kids, it was faith-based. And the one thing that I've always naturally been able to do is talk, be a talker, be a public speaker. It doesn't faze me. I look forward to it. I'm not afraid of it. And when I retired from that career, my next career was in the business world, where I did high ticket sales and introduced engineers and made pitches for Lucent Technologies to SBC and places like that. I would often get ribbed because I sounded like I was preaching. And what they would say sometimes was, all right, McKay, yeah, pass the plate around. Let's take a collection for this guy. You know, that's what they always say at the end. And, you know, I took it in stride, but it was, again, one of the habits that you talk about. And it was built around advancing other people. But I mean, you know, again, self-awareness, reading the room. Sometimes I need to stop preaching so much. And I hope that I've learned my lesson before my tenure as a podcaster. But you know what? Sometimes the truth comes out. Sometimes that light shines through. Sometimes you can take the podcaster out of the plate passing, but you can't take the plate passing out of the podcaster, I presume. How's that for a lot of alliteration?
That's right, indeed. The P invasion, baby. It's powerful, baby.
Oh, boy, man. I love it. Anyway, we've run out of time. I love everything you said. You're just, you know, you have the greatest last name for who you are. You are a Brightmon. You are the bright light in a world where everybody's pessimistic and everybody hates everything. I love you, man. I think you're awesome. We should have you on more. His name is Dom Brightmon. He's an author. He's a podcaster. I've got both of his books at the top of my Amazon queue right now when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. And also when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Dom, you're going to be magically teleported to, well, dombrightmon.com with an M-O-N. That's easy enough to remember because it's the name of our guest. And this guy was fortunate enough to snag up his own domain, unlike yours truly. Some other Scott McKay with one T has owned scottmckay.com since, get this, you ready for this? 1993.
Damn.
I know. Like God. 2 years before anybody knew there was a web. This guy was on top of things, sure enough. But anyway, you were a lot more fortunate than I was. I don't want to say lucky because I don't think luck has anything to do with it. But when you go to dombrightmon.com by typing in mountaintoppodcast.com/Dom or dombrightmon.com, what are they going to find, Dom?
Yes, they're going to find the Going North podcast, indeed. Definitely got to have Scott on the show, indeed, to return the multiple favors, indeed, where you get to hear some great authors. And there's also a free gift, 21 lessons learned from 2+ years of podcasting, even though I need to change that to 5+ years now, where you get 21 free tips to start, grow, and manage a successful podcast of your own. And yours truly is on the road to interviewing over 1,000 authors, and I'm 700 or so in. So definitely check it out on dombrightmon.com.
Good grief, man. You know, I appreciate your kind words back at the beginning of the show where you said, you know, I'm one of the OGs here and been doing it for 16 years and had 350 episodes, yada, yada. But you know what? You were quick to change the subject to something else that was water under the bridge at the time. But now that you brought it back up, if you actually do the division, if you do the arithmetic there, I'm a slacker. I mean, if you take 16 years and divide it by 350, I really have been a slacker. I haven't, moved on this podcasting thing at all in the way some of you guys have. As a matter of fact, if you guys go back through the annals, that's with 2 N's, of the show, some would argue there's only a need for 1 N. But some of you guys may have gone back through the history of the show and realized I only started doing these podcasts weekly. These episodes were only weekly starting about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, so I got on point when podcasting really, really did pick up. But yeah, man, you've got this podcasting thing down too. And listen, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate this topic. You're the absolute best guy I know to bring the noise about it. And man, just thank you for stopping by today. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, I'm honored, man. Thanks again for having me on, man. It's great when you invite someone to come back on. It means nothing stupid happened.
Well, yeah. I mean, and even if it did, it was fun and profitable and productive. So, but, you're a very smart guy. I love everything you talk about, and the honor is all mine. And guys, if you have not yet been to mountaintoppodcast.com relatively recently, go ahead and grab a copy of my first book, Deserve What You Want. It goes for $37 all day in the X and Y Communications Company store. But when you sign up for my daily newsletter, which is absolutely free, by the way, you'll be treated to a copy of that book, which you can go through. Lots of personal experience in there that I pass on to you guys. Hopefully it's going to save you the trouble that I had to work through on my own, and a whole lot in there about how to get better with women, how to improve your relationships. Listen, guys, if you're coming off a divorce, if there's been a breakup and you're getting back out there, that book is going to feel to you like I wrote it exactly for you. Deserve What You Want is my free gift when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com. Perhaps uncharacteristically, I talked about coaching in the middle of this show, which I don't usually do. But again, guys, if you have not yet gotten on the phone with me for 25 minutes, that's free also. Business is good around here. If coaching is right for you, well, we'll make something happen. But I always love to talk to you guys so I can keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there with you guys. And so we can come up with good topics for the show and make sure that I'm keeping it real for you. All of that and more, including our wonderful sponsors, Jocko Willink's company Origin in Maine, Hero Soap, and Keyport.com are there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com as well. When you use any of our 3 sponsors' wonderful products, always be sure to use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an extra 10% off. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.